Prison sounds horrible.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Andy. Thanks.
Prison Mike, what's the very, very worst thing about prison?
The worst thing about prison was the Dementors. They were flying all over the place, and they were scary, and then they'd come down and they'd suck the soul out of your body, and it hurt.
Dementors like in Harry Potter?
No, not Harry Potter.
It's Britney, bitch.
And Iraq, everywhere like such as.
I'm supposed to be the franchise player, and we're in here talking about practice.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Out, Charlie! Out!
Our next door neighbors are foreign countries.
I call upon all nations to do everything they can to stop these terrorist killers. Thank you. Now watch this drive.
Hey everybody, and welcome to Remember Shuffle. My name is Ben. With me as always is my co-host Giordano.
Hey to do the podcast, are you, Ben?
And today we are joined by, I believe, fourth time returning Remember Shuffle guest, John. Say hi, John.
Hello. I'm happy to be back. Happy to talk about such a beloved franchise.
Yes, John has a bit of a streak going where he comes on to talk about the most mainstream, successful, major franchises of the decade. He's come on for The Matrix and both of our Lord of the Rings episodes. And today, we've avoided it for long enough. We're finally doing it.
Yes, we are. Thank you. I have been asking Ben to do Harry Potter for 2.5 years.
Yeah.
And I finally have worn him down.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're doing it. We're doing it for the clicks. We're doing it for the conversion rate. And because this is such an important part of the 2000s.
He cast some kind of charm on me. He bewitched me and tricked me into doing this.
Wouldn't it be more of a curse, I think, honestly.
Some sort of hex.
We are turning to the annoying millennial Bible, Harry Potter.
Yes, a franchise so dear to my heart growing up. I've read it so many times. Was never a big fan of the movies. I've softened on them quite a bit as I've gotten older. I said this on Star Wars, but I'm going to say it for Harry Potter, and it's indicative of how bad these franchises are. If you had gone to me at 15 and you were like, hey, when you're 30, they're going to release new Harry Potter movies, and you're just not going to watch them, I'd have said that I was mad. Had someone obliviated my strong feelings for Harry Potter? And no, they haven't. They still exist, but we'll get into how the Harry Potter franchise has become such a cynical cash grab and what makes some of these books kind of pleasant, because you reread the books for this episode, Ben, and you were saying...
Yeah, it was coming back.
You weren't saying bah humbug.
I was not bah humbugging the books. I read all these books as a child, the age at which you were supposed to read these books. I am a little bit of a hater. We'll get through the intro and get to that point, but my heart's not made of stone. I read these as a kid. I loved these as a kid, but the franchise has truly, thanks to the corporatization of media and franchising and monetizing every single aspect of this universe, has just had this enormous fall from grace, much like their creator.
I've been falling asleep to them for a few months now, because you can fall asleep to a description of like what homework they have this week. It's not like overly engrossing. I certainly have this nostalgic attachment to how I felt as a kid, as a paper boy, thinking about Harry Potter, trying to pass the time. And it's like a nostalgia thing for me. And I don't think that Harry Potter will ever reach the heights of a true classic. It's a millennial classic. It's not necessarily the best children's book for every generation. I have all this nostalgia from my childhood in Harry Potter, and I wonder if boomers have the same feeling. Are they like, you know what, I know that Gilligan's Island might not be the greatest series of all time, but I just thought so much about wanting to live on Gilligan's Island.
They just thought Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys were about as cool as it got.
Right. Well, I mean, Harry Potter is also sort of a detective tale.
So here is our roadmap for today's episode. Because how are you going to approach 7 books and 8 movies and everything else? Our plan, we will do brief plot synopses of each book, 5 minutes max per book, because you probably haven't reread, hopefully, you haven't reread these recently. Then we'll discuss the characters. Then we'll discuss the world of Harry Potter, probably its greatest strength. We'll turn to the themes and big ideas of the text. And then, as always, our echoes in the culture and our closing thoughts. That's the plan.
When we go through the plot synopsis, I really want to just bring up each book and talk a little bit about what is unique and special about this book. If I were to open it up to a random page, what are the sorts of things that the characters are likely to be talking about specifically in this book? So we'll start with the Philosopher's/Sorcerer's Stone. Philosopher's Stone for our British and Canadian listeners. Sorcerer's Stone for the Americans. This is our introduction into the wizarding world. And so most of this book is concerned with whimsy and describing the ways in which this world operates and is whimsical, and the sense of childhood wonder that you have at also experiencing this world for the first time, like Harry Potter. Descriptions of the Bertie Bott's flavored beans or the chocolate frogs. You're getting all these details for the first time and experiencing it like Harry is, experiencing Quidditch for the first time. Description of the rules of Quidditch.
Bothered me fucking immediately. I was like, this does not make any sense.
Hold your ire. We do also have a section in our outline that just says miscellaneous dunkings.
Okay, I'll just have to hold a lot of ire.
But thematically, the book is about the importance and power of friendship. Harry is making friends at Hogwarts. He's making friends for the first time in his life and finding that through the strength of having these friends, he's able to overcome Voldemort.
Yes, exactly. Harry is like the reader. He is completely new to the world, so you get to project onto him and learn all about this as he is a fish out of water, which I think is actually a pretty good lesson for children. Children are constantly encountering new experiences that they don't fully understand. So I think as a kid reading it, even if you're not going to a fucking wizard school, you can recognize some of these feelings that you get and building these strong friendships that let you solve mysteries. A universal feeling.
They're not even friends with Hermione in the first half of the book, basically. They only have derision for her for being a nerd. And the movie, too, by Christopher Columbus, it has a very distinctive look compared to the latter six, I find.
Wait, pause. Christopher Columbus? That's his actual name?
He's a proud Italian-American director. End the story.
Yeah. What the fuck is this denigration? Yeah, like...
He had to make those Harry Potter movies. Took a lot of guts.
He goes by Chris Columbus. I think that's the issue. He goes by Chris Columbus, not Christopher. And I think he's smart for doing that. Born Christopher Joseph Columbus. Wow. But yeah, he wisely just goes by Chris.
Yeah, the basic plot, as Harry goes through his year, he learns gradually more and more about the plot MacGuffin, which is the Philosopher's Stone, an item that grants immortality. And he is convinced that while everyone else thinks the Dark Lord Voldemort, who killed Harry's parents, has been defeated and is no longer in play, only Harry, the 11-year-old boy, is smart enough to realize that Voldemort either is back or is coming back and needs to prevent him from acquiring this stone.
Yeah, I believe he thinks it's Snape, right, who's helping Voldemort. So we get to the Chamber of Secrets next, the second book in the series. The first one I read because my mother didn't understand the concept of a sequential order. When I was 11, she bought me the Chamber of Secrets. But this introduces wizard racism to the world. That's one of the central features of this story, is there's this conflict between purebloods and mudbloods.
Whoa!
Sorry, I'll have to bleep that out.
You can't go dropping M-bombs on the pod, dude.
You know, that sets you back in all those podcast rating things. You gotta watch the profanity.
So we, learned that there are these old wizarding families who are obsessed with the idea of racial purity. And one of the founders of Hogwarts, Salazar Slytherin, has built a sort of genocide machine in the school.
Uh-oh.
And it is turned loose upon the school. It starts killing or attempting to kill the Muggleborns.
Yes, because according to the rules of the world, sometimes you can have two non-magical parents who just somehow, through some kind of recessive gene, produce a magical child.
Yeah.
Stories I like to tell the dads.
And so if you open up this book to any random place, you're likely to see a passage about the nature of wizard racism, purebloods versus Muggleborns, why pureblood wizards feel like they are somehow better or need to be more safeguarded with their magical talents. We learned that certain families like the Malfoys are from aristocratic pureblood families that go back a long time and have all this inherited wealth, so much that he uses it to buy the entire Slytherin Quidditch team, Nimbus 2001s. There's this connection between purebloodism often and wealth and racial purity, which will basically serve as one of the most identifiable themes throughout the entire Harry Potter series, as it's Voldemort's main motivation within this world is to have subjugation of non-magical people by magical people. It also introduces, I think, one of the most memorable characters from this book, which is the new Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, Gilderoy Lockhart, a man who I believe is very well characterized as someone who is vain and obsessed with his own celebrity, someone who is also a liar. He's basically like an influencer in this world and tries to use Harry as an attempt to aggregate his own fame in a way.
Are there any teachers for the Defense Against Dark Arts who are not liars?
I guess Umbridge, the first honest one.
Yeah, there we go. Honesty, that's just what these kids...
The one that the Ministry put in, too.
Trust the system.
Gotta trust big government.
Okay. The third one, The Prisoner of Azkaban. It is the high watermark of the series for a whole host of reasons, but one of those reasons being J.K. Rowling is a much more talented talented children's author than she is a YA author. YA being young adult. And in 4, 5, 6, 7, she tries to age up the genre to age along with her fans and be more YA and less children's literature. And she just doesn't have the skill to pull it off. So this is kind of the high watermark of the series. It fleshes out a bunch of the backstory and lore about what Harry's parents were doing during their time at Hogwarts, Harry's parents and Snape, and some new characters that we learn about, Sirius Black and others. It also introduces Wizard Prison, run by the Dementors. I think fear is one of the big themes of this one.
Yeah, Harry repeatedly has fear-based panic attacks when faced with the Dementors, something he's ridiculed for often and needs to overcome in the end, using his Patronus charm. If you were to open up this book at any given time, you'd probably be reading some story about Hogsmeade, or there's also a conflict between Ron and Hermione in this book. They are fighting about their pets, and it blows up into a larger conflict, and they need to reconcile. You're learning about the prior generation, specifically around James Potter and his closest friends, and how that led ultimately to the death of his parents. It's the only story that doesn't directly involve Voldemort, which does feel like a little bit like a breath of fresh air.
Introduce my personal 2 favorite characters in the whole series as well, which is Lupin and Sirius Black.
Yep.
Yeah, I should note that the third movie, directed by a friend of the pod, Alfonso Cuarón, who we talked about on Children of Men, the director of that movie, and another excellent movie called Y Tu Mama Tambien. But he made this Harry Potter movie so that he could make Children of Men. Guillermo del Toro apparently nominated Cuarón, and Cuarón was like, I'm not making a Harry Potter movie. And Toro told him, listen, fucking moron, buy the books, make the movie, and then you can do whatever you want.
Yep.
And he was right.
Correct.
Then you can lose money on Children of Men. It features one specific plot device. Thankfully, she didn't go back to it too often, but Rowling introduced the Time Turner in this book. One of the most frustrating things about this book series that we'll talk about is that there are things that seem like they should be a lot more useful than they are, and the Time Turners is one of them. Our heroes use the Time Turners in this book for small tasks like taking additional classes, and large tasks like saving the lives of other people. And sometimes you are left wondering, why aren't they using this Time Turner more often?
It's sort of like a world-breaking thing that she introduces, and then it's just like, what? Let's just kind of like move on from that.
And then she takes it away in the 5th by destroying them. But then the entire plot of the Harry Potter and the Cursed Child Broadway play, which I saw for this podcast, revolves around the use of Time Turners. So she couldn't help herself.
If one of the wizard racists got a hold of a Time Turner, it'd be the Time Turner Diaries. Am I right? For those who know, they'll know.
I'll take your word for it.
It's like the white supremacist Bible.
Oh, okay.
Not only do they use the Time Turner to attend more classes instead of any host of things they could do, what does everyone do with their first run with a time machine in our world? You kill baby Hitler.
You kill baby Hitler.
It's everyone's first move. Why not kill baby Voldemort? Just fucking smother Tom Riddle in his orphanage crib.
Right.
Save ourselves a lot of grief, you know?
Which, funnily enough, in the play, Cursed Child, it's primarily about going back in time to save Cedric. And so they go back in time 3 times to stop Cedric from advancing in the Triwizard Tournament so that he doesn't put his hand on it at the same time as Harry and get transported to the park. But it's like, I'm going to go back a little farther.
Hey, you guys really think this through.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you a quick question, Jordan, because I did not go see the play. Did using the Time Turner result in unintended consequences?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
no. It's the plot of every time travel story.
It's wholly unoriginal from Back to the Future or any other time travel story. It's like, oh, it has these unintended consequences, and now, like...
Cedric's mom wants to have sex with him.
Yeah. So, yeah, Time Turner is very stupid.
Goblet of Fire, right? This is the first YA one. It is insanely plot heavy. Giordano and I were trying to think of like, what is the big thing that it adds? And it adds some stuff, as we'll see. It continues to flesh out the universe.
In a very specific way. We get 2 major events in this book that involve the international wizarding community. Both the Quidditch World Cup and the Triwizard Tournament will involve us meeting wizards from Ireland, Bulgaria, France, Eastern Europe. It's funny, we were at the bathhouse before this, and I was describing the concept of this book introducing international wizardry, and I was getting the most eye rolls from a friend of ours that I've ever seen. Oh, it's international wizardry. Got my ass.
Yeah, I also just want to point out, this is where J.K. Rowling is really starting to feel herself as a writer. I just did a quick search for how long the audiobooks are. Sorcerer's Stone, a tight 8-hour audiobook. Listen on 2 times speed, 4 hours, you're done in an afternoon. The Goblet of Fire is the first one with this massive bloat. It is 20 hours long.
Holy shit. I didn't realize it was that stark. Wow.
Look at the width of the books. They explode.
You can literally see it. They get bloated and meandering because they are all very, very plot heavy.
In these books, like 4, 5, 6, you start to get a lot more descriptions of these weekly routines that the characters are in, and it does bloat them a little bit. But if you like the idea of being at this magical boarding school, then okay, yeah, I'll listen to like what homework was assigned this week and how difficult it was to do, and then next week what homework was assigned and what we learned in class. I think you do start to get a lot more descriptions of what was the divination homework this week.
Not looking for more tasks, Jornado. This is also where we get Hermione start to go on her crusade for the cause of the house elves, because the wizarding world has slaves.
Well, and I should note, too, that this book, specifically, the theme that they're going for here is, like, we talked before about intra-wizard racism, but now we have sort of inter-wizard racism. So we understand, how do wizards feel about themselves relative to house elves, relative to centaurs, relative to Vila, this classification of the beings and legal status.
And because it's YA stuff, now we get J.K. Rowling's first bumbling attempts at describing teen romance.
Yes. Harry and Ron have dates to the Yule Ball, as does Hermione, who goes with Victor Crumb. This is our first attempt to talk about romance with our young heroes. Like we said, this one's very plot heavy, it has the most intrigue, I think, and ends with Voldemort fully coming back in fully
corporeal form.
Exactly. By kidnapping Harry and using his blood. And so we get this foreshadowing event at the Quidditch World Cup with this Charlottesville-style riot by the Death Eaters, and the movie culminates in Voldemort coming back. Big twist at the end of this one of the biggest twists, I'd say. And yeah, in terms of our main characters, Ron and Harry spend a significant amount of this time feuding. Ron starts to get jealous at Harry's celebrity status, especially after he's chosen to be a Hogwarts champion. But they eventually overcome this by not talking about it. It's funny that they make repeated references to toxic masculinity also existing in the wizarding world, that men should not talk about their feelings, or at least don't talk about their feelings.
I think that's just the British stuff, the English side of it.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to Order of the Phoenix.
Border of the Phoenix.
Ooh. This one was always my favorite growing up because it was the longest, so I got to spend the most time with my friends.
This was your favorite?
It was, yeah.
Jeez.
The amount of times I've been compelled to boo, Trey. And I'm like boo.
I'm not a hater, unfortunately. I don't have hate in my heart.
This book came out in 2004, so I would have been like 14, give or take. And even at that age, when I was not the most discerning reader, I was like, this shit stinks. I was a kid who listened to emo music and thought this was too angsty.
Well, I guess what I liked about it is it has a consistent theme of alienation. Specifically, Harry has sort of been shunned by the rest of society, by the journalism industry, by the government. No one believes him that Voldemort is back.
Yeah, the theme is that the government is wrong and the 15-year-old boy is right.
Which you kind of have to have in a children's story. Anything that's targeted at children, you need to infuse it with some sense of distrust for authority.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what they're doing, is like, imagine you're the only one who is willing to speak the truth, and everyone is colluding against you. And there's all these small details I noticed in this book where J.K. Rowling is actually using smaller details to build towards this thesis. So there's these things called threstrals, which are horses that can't be seen unless you've seen someone die. And Harry is able to see these horses because he's seen Cedric die. And he's telling Ron and Hermione, look at these dead horses. And they're saying, what are you talking about? And so you get this smaller microcosm of the larger theme of Harry feeling like, am I crazy? Am I the only one who sees this? Why do I feel like I'm alienated? And ultimately, Unfortunately, he has to turn towards alternative journalism sources like the Quibbler, the only people willing to tell his story, and his alt gang of Dumbledore's army, the people that will eventually become the fulcrum of the resistance against Lord Voldemort. Just on this anti-authority note, I think that Professor Umbridge is one of the most well-characterized people in the entire series. I find her to be an intensely hateable figure. Evil manifested as bureaucratic fascism. Someone who does eventually also fit so seamlessly into Voldemort's government once he comes back.
The collaborator.
Yes, exactly.
Someone who worships authority for the sake of authority. Rules for the sake of rules.
Yeah, and so I very much enjoyed the character of Professor Umbridge. I thought that she was well characterized. The actual conflict in this one is mostly between Harry and just everyone else. Am I crazy? Do I feel like no one understands me? Well, it really is the emo one, I guess.
Yeah, this is why I tuned right out after this. I was like, all right, you'll ask me.
And so at the end of this book, there's a big fight at the Ministry of Magic, and Voldemort is back, and it's witnessed by everyone, by the wizarding world. So finally, Harry has been vindicated, and so we can move on to an entirely new setting in the 6th book. Basically, one in which Voldemort being back is established in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, the 6th book.
Yeah, we threw the movie on of this one last night, and it is getting so dark. Everything has been put through a filter on this one. It opens with a fucking terrorist attack in London. A CGI terrorist attack on a bridge of some kind. Now, the parents are worried about sending their kids to Hogwarts. It's taken as a given that the wizarding world is in crisis. And over the course of this book, Harry discovers a book in the universe that's said to belong to the Half-Blood Prince and is filled with notes in the margins, or by its fancy Latin word, marginalia.
Great word.
Phenomenal word. And he reads through these marginalia and starts to learn, once again, more and more about the backstory and the lore surrounding one Tom Riddle, aka Voldemort.
Yeah, I think the main theme of this book often is a we're not so different, you and I, between Harry Potter and Voldemort. We see how Voldemort grew up in an orphanage situation not that different from Harry's. We see a lot of connections between their brains. Voldemort can literally go into Harry's brain and vice versa.
They're both huge assholes.
Both half-blooded, and a lot of talk about the Horcruxes, which as a plot device, I thought fit pretty well in with the existing lore. I didn't mind the Horcruxes. I thought they were pretty good MacGuffin. The idea that Voldemort has split his soul into 7 different items that Harry must now destroy. One of which was the diary, which was the central focus of this Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. And yeah, this is the famous Snape Kills Dumbledore book, which I gotta say at the time felt pretty world-breaking. While watching the movie yesterday, I was pretty bored. I was like, okay. Especially once you've sort of lost reverence for Dumbledore, which we'll talk about later, but really takes a lot off of that moment where you're like, oh yeah, this guy's kind of a fucking moron. Okay, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. This is the 7th one. I am all aboard with you guys. I think this one is absolute dog shit. Do not like it at all. I understand what she was going for when they're in the field and they're going a little stir crazy in the tent and they're alienated. Okay, that is a thing that is communicated well. The main issue I have with Rowling is that because this universe doesn't really make sense if you look at it too closely, Hogwarts is a place where you can narrow the rules of the universe and say that like, oh, well, maybe this could be true at Hogwarts because of some specific conditions. None of this book takes place at Hogwarts. And where do you want to be when you're in the wizarding world? You want to be at the fancy boarding school with your friends, okay? Want to be getting homework, like all millennial nerds. I want to know what I have for homework. And there's no homework in this one.
No.
What is the most successful Harry Potter franchise of the last 10 years? It's been Hogwarts Legacy, because I want to go to Hogwarts. These Grindelwald movies, no Hogwarts. The 7th Harry Potter book, no Hogwarts.
Dude, imagine if one of those shitty fucking theme parks that they had was just a field with a tent. It's like
the 7th one.
Feel the magic.
And I would also say this is the one that, like we mentioned, since the 2nd book, we've been talking about wizard racism. We've been boiling that frog slowly. And by the time we get to the 7th book, the entire thing is this lazy, unsubtle World War II analogy. And many wizards die at the climax of this book. Like Fred or George, one of the 2 Weasley twins, dies, as well as a whole bunch of other wizard characters that we met.
Tonks, Lupin.
The owl.
Oh yeah, Hedwig dies.
Oh, fucking Dobby, they have to bury his ass.
Oh yeah, Dobby the elf dies. But he dies a free elf, Giordano.
I was such a hater. I remember when the spoilers leaked about who died. And I was like, I know what page they die on, and I didn't have the heart to
Oh
like
my God.
to spoil it for people. When I saw that Hedwig died, I was like, she's really just trying to pull in at all the emotional straws here. It's like, what do I got to do for the big finale? Kill the owl.
Right. Yeah. Kill one of the twins. Yeah.
Sure, you want to throw some stakes in there, but it felt like a lot of darts at a board.
And you just look at these two snapshots. Let's take a snapshot of book 1 and a snapshot of book 7. Book 1 is a sweet tale about an orphan boy finding himself and finding friends, finding community, and growing into a better, fuller version of himself. This one's about how your friends die. This one's about fucking trauma. This one's about raising an army against fascism and reliving the World War II narrative. They're so different in terms of tone and plot and characters and style. Like I said, this is her really trying to go YA, or maybe even turn into a fully on grown-up book now, that she just doesn't have the chops for it.
Yeah. I also hate the lore that is introduced in this book. The Deathly Hallows, if you want to debate me, bro, on the comment section or something, let me know, because I fail to find these to be an overly compelling addition to the existing lore. So what we learn is that there are these folkloric items from wizard folklore. The invisibility cloak, which Harry has had since the first book, which no one has mentioned up to this point, is an item from a folk tale, nor has anyone remarked upon how uniquely rare it is.
Yeah, it would be like if an alien was being raised among humans, and they were like, yo, I got this magic flute that summons rats, and I can make the rats do whatever I want. And nobody mentioned the Pied Piper story for his entire life.
Yeah. Ron was never like, oh, there's actually like a folktale or whatever.
Oh, we just thought you knew.
Yeah. One of the other Deathly Hallows is a super mega sigma powerful wand, which is used basically effectively by nobody in the entire book series. In fact, everybody who does use it is beaten within the last couple books. So just never really had that much gravitas. And a ring, which I honestly don't even remember too many details about, which is odd because I have a pretty encyclopedic memory of Harry Potter. So the idea that there are hundreds of millennials who get the Deathly Hallows tattoo is kind of indicative of the problem with this series.
I mean, apparently this tattoo has more regrets than transitioning.
Okay, so that's our plot summary. You're welcome. We spent about 30 minutes on that.
Hey, that's under time. I said 5 minutes per book and there's 7, so.
We did a 90-second plot recap for Children of Men, and someone did complain about that in the comments. So we're going to try a little bit different thing here this time and round out the plot a little bit more.
So let's turn now to our characters. Starting with the chosen one himself, Harry Potter.
The boy who lived. One of the most powerful wizards of all time tried to kill him as a 1-year-old baby, and it backfired and killed basically everyone's common enemy. So it's made him something of a celebrity in the wizarding world. But however, he was raised by the Dursleys, who are often very funny. We'll talk about them later. But psychologically, a very interesting protagonist. Not interesting, more like he's a very flat protagonist because he's almost perfect in every way. He's a guy who has suffered a lifetime's worth of trauma and yet has not allowed it to scar him emotionally in almost any way.
Well, he's already got one.
Well, he's got the physical scar. Someone who's been unloved their entire life might have a hard time connecting or trusting others, something that Harry almost never takes out on other people in any way. He doesn't seem to have internalized the trauma of being unloved.
Nope, because he is a special boy. This is a classic. He's the chosen one like Neo or Jesus or any messianic special boy, hero's journey ass protagonist, Luke Skywalker, whatever. That's him. That's him, the special orphan.
I always found him very whiny, but I always found him very, like, he was a jerk. He's a jerk to people. And that was one of the things I actually really didn't like about the book series when I read that. I was like, he's an ass.
To who?
To his friends, to Ron, to Hermione. He's an ass.
How so?
He's just a jerk. He doesn't treat them very nicely.
Can you name a specific example?
It's been a minute, but he gets very touchy. He doesn't see the way in which his celebrity plays out and affects his friends, and his friends are also jerks and immature about it. But that's one of the things.
Children, John.
I know they act like it. It's like, grow the fuck up. Like, you're living off a load of magic school. Like, magically turn into a slightly better human being because you're all petulant.
So you disagree with me? You find
Kinda.
that he's actually quite antisocial, and maybe this is influenced by his lack of having any love growing up. Because to me, his only flaws are that he's prideful.
Very prideful.
He wears glasses.
Yeah, some nerd. He's some rich jock. Oh, I'm the star of the Quidditch team, and I've got unlimited money. I'm not going to share it with my little poor friend. I agree that the scarring of the previous stuff never really seemed to come up. He was like, oh, I'm sad about it. But it didn't seem to actually impact a lot of how he was and treated people. But yeah, I often found Harry actually, despite his tragic backstory, very unsympathetic.
The tragedy of his home life is used for comical effect, but also to have you, the audience, sympathize with this boy. So it seems like the first lesson of British fiction is to make your story about an orphan boy so that people sympathize with them.
But the book presents him as selfless all the time. He's constantly saving Hogwarts when no one else will. He literally dies in the second book. He dies trying to save someone and is brought back by the Phoenix Tears or whatever.
This might be really me remembering 5. It's 4 and 5 where there's the jealousy bit comes in with Ron. That stuff all was just like, yeah, he's a bad friend. That's really what stood out more than the earlier books.
Listen, Ron's got what we call big sidekick energy.
Oh,
he likes being treated that way, as we'll see.
Yeah, let's move on to Ron Weasley. The quality that you could articulate the most is that he has red hair and freckles. And yeah, he is the sidekick. And so all of his qualities revolve around being a sidekick. He can do exposition because he grew up in the wizarding world. He's self-sacrificing.
He's generally helpful. He doesn't really have any traits of his own in the books, really.
One of the least characterized people in the books is Ron. And the movies attempt to make him a bit more of like a lazy coward, I guess.
He's comic relief.
There's some pretty significant differences, I think one of which is in the second book, they're meant to go into the forest to follow the spiders. And in the book, Ron even says like, all right, let's get to it. Come on, let's go into the forest. He's brave. He's helpful. And then in the movies, Ron half the time is just like, spiders. Like he's terrified of everything.
Yeah, this is also not a character trait, but he's poor. It has got a lot of siblings.
She really makes it a character trait.
In J.K. Rowling's world, that is a character trait. Your socioeconomic class.
It is like a constant part of every part of their characterization.
Yeah, at one point in the 6th book, there's a woman, a young woman, a girl, a teenage girl, has a infatuation with Harry Potter, and she tries to secretly spike him with a love potion, but Ron accidentally drinks it. And Jordana was like, that's classic sidekick behavior. That's medieval king's sidekick behavior. Accidentally drinking the poison for
yeah.
Very good.
Hermione Granger is the third sidekick in our famous trio here. She's well characterized, I think. She's sort of a Lisa Simpson style keener.
She's the type of person who, despite being born to Muggle parents, takes the class Muggle studies. It would be like if we 3 majored in Canadian studies.
Be a fantastically easy credit.
At a university in Sri Lanka. we took Canadian studies, and actually we had so much coursework already that we had to get a time machine to take our Canadian studies class. There's this scene in Prisoner of Azkaban where they're celebrating winning the Quidditch House Cup in the common room. Should be one of the happiest moments for House Gryffindor. And Hermione is not partaking. She's doing her Muggle studies homework.
Now, if you two don't mind, I'm going to bed before either of you come up with another clever idea to get us killed. Or worse, expelled.
I think someone who's meant to represent, in a lot of ways, the reader. If you are a millennial nerd, you're maybe identifying with Hermione Granger. She's the PMC class. She becomes Minister for Magic one day. She is Muggle-born, who in this universe are often meant to be a stand-in for recent immigrants to the developed world, to places like England or the United States, sort of the model minority of this universe. And she's also frequently the target of racial abuse from Malfoy and other Slytherins and Voldemort's allies in general.
And let's be clear, the third-person omniscient narrator in the first book, who I guess is meant to kind of be on Harry's side, describes her so funny. There are lines that are basically like, Hermione nagged bossily.
She's also the only character who cares about the whole, we have slaves.
Yes.
We'll get to that later. We'll talk. We have a slavery section. So just moving through the last couple of characters here, we have Snape, someone who I feel like there's a lot of apologia for. Harry names his kid after him, and a lot of fans are like, I was so heartbroken at Snape's death. Much like George Bush, there's a big Snape rehabilitation project going on, because he was actually only pretending to be a dick to teenagers for 20 years, under orders from Dumbledore.
Dude, J.K. Rowling keeps shitting out fucking spin-offs. I want to see the Departed style spin-off from Snape's perspective. When Dumbledore's like, we gotta get you into South Hogwarts.
Your cousin was in the Death Eaters. And your mother was in the Dumbledore's army. How about you were code switching all the time? See, that's the thing the Mudbloods don't understand. You gotta tank it. Cue the
Give me shelter.
Give me shelter. Yeah.
Yeah, he is the abusive bully teacher who walks the fine line. Everyone knows he's a Slytherin. Everyone suspects he's a Death Eater. And there's a big reveal, bait and switch, that he was a double agent for Dumbledore the entire time. And I think my beef is that, one, it really doesn't feel earned. And two, I feel like he could have done his job without being quite as abusive as he was. And three, you have the fact that he's fucking Severus Simp, dude. The reason he hates Harry Potter is that he had a crush in high school on Lily Potter 20 years ago.
Pathetic.
Dude, get over it.
I will say the Alan Rickman performance is just...
Oh my god, he's so good.
Chef's kiss.
Everybody loves Alan Rickman. That's who we miss.
Yeah.
His tone and general speech pattern are just incredible in these movies. One of the funniest details involving Snape is that he bullies Neville Longbottom, who's not even the target of Dumbledore's sort of secret pact with him. So much so that at one point in the third book, there's a boggart, which turns into the thing that you're most afraid of. And the boggart turns into Snape for Neville. And Lupin never thinks, like, should I talk to the principal about the fact that, like, one of the things that one of my students fears the most is one of his teachers?
That just means he's a good teacher at an English boarding school.
Yeah. Okay. Dumbledore, the hero, the Gandalf of this story, someone who is aloof.
Don't denigrate Gandalf like this. Watch your fucking mouth. Keep his name out of your mouth.
Much like Gandalf, he's supposed to be sort of omnipotent, but only when he's focused enough to deliver results. You're sort of meant to assume that behind the scenes, this guy is really on top of things. Unfortunately, in the books, whenever we're dealing with Dumbledore, like at the climax of the first book, the reason that he's not there is because someone sends him a letter saying that he's needed at the ministry. This is how our omnipotent hero is duped by like a wrong number.
He likes a little business travel. He likes to get to the hotel, get a little room service.
Yeah,
He's just eager to get away. You know, it's a long school year.
He's never there when he is most needed. That is his defining trait. One of the funniest things is that the delta, to use the math word, the delta between how people talk about Dumbledore and what we see in terms of how he acts is the fucking Grand Canyon of vast, where he's the greatest wizard to ever live.
He's a living legend. He's on the baseball cards already.
He's too good to be Minister of Magic.
And yet he keeps hiring professors that have pretty big flaws.
This one could turn into a wolf and eat you. That's fine.
Oh, so yeah, that's a little anti-werewolf racism from John.
I didn't realize they were established like it's A-okay. I thought it was just like one werewolf we were cool with.
A student died on campus. And Hitler was revived under his watch.
You usually have to resign in shame for that shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, partly because Mad-Eye Moody, the professor he hired for the fourth year, there was an imposter basically drinking a polyjuice potion, Barty Crouch Jr., every 24 hours to appear to be Mad-Eye. Something that maybe could have been solved by having a single conversation with your new hire at some point throughout the year.
No one-on-ones, no check-ins.
Yeah, Dumbledore has abandoned the one-on-one check-in with any of the professors.
But listen, Barty Crouch Jr., he just kept publishing, okay? So Dumbledore wasn't asking any questions. It's publish or perish in this business.
Publish or perish, and the man was publishing.
Yeah, I like to imagine he keeps his job because behind the scenes, he's just this powerhouse fundraiser, and he's just in bed with the worst people in the wizarding world, where he's like, hey, you saw how quickly I cleared out those pro-Palestine wizard protesters?
Yeah, he's got to worry about the Hogwarts alumni. He's very popular with them.
Yeah.
But yeah, he seems to bumble so many different things. He really gets lucky that Harry is so competent and good, both in what happens at Hogwarts, but also just the idea that he drops them off with the Dursleys, who will isolate him and make him feel unloved for 10 years. You really just got lucky that Harry did not internalize any of that trauma. There's a troll loose in the dungeon. Should we try and get there before these 10-year-olds? I don't know. That troll's not going anywhere.
Why do they even have staff?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a line that did get a laugh out of me. J.K. Rowling isn't great at humor, but every now and then she has a joke that hits, where the line is, this is quoting Dumbledore, "Before we begin our banquet, I would like to say a few words. And here they are. Nitwit, blubber, oddment." And then he sits down. He's clearly just a mentally unwell man.
It's very like, let's say grace. All right, Grace, let's eat.
Yeah. He's trying out some new material. The last character we'll just give a quick shout out to is Draco Malfoy, Harry's nemesis. I've never been a big nemesis guy. I feel like by the third year I would have been like, all right, dude, let's squash the beef.
Hop on the pod. We'll talk it out on mic.
Yeah. But he cannot help himself. Literally every time they are in the same room, he is antagonizing Harry. We only really know him from that angle. So this is someone who at every opportunity would be like, Potter's here again. Look at Weasley with his poor people clothes. And the mudblood he hangs out with. He's always on, and he's always very mean to Harry.
Does he have a redemption arc by the final?
He does.
Okay.
Oh, it's so annoying. He lives in the end because he does one pro-Harry, anti-Voldemort thing in the final moments of the plot. After basically causing Dumbledore's death and being a Death Eater up until then. But in the last movie, it asked you to sympathize a little bit with Malfoy because he's sort of forced into his role by his family and his father. Okay, now we've eaten the vegetables. Let's do the fun stuff.
Yes.
Let's talk about the world, the themes, the bad stuff. And we'll start first with just what is this fantasy world? She's taken all of these elements that Tolkien has introduced, like elves and goblins and wizards.
Her goblins are a little different. Tolkien has like goblins with like mountain kings and goblins with other stuff. Hers are just like, well, how would you put it? Bankers?
Like a caricature from a Der Stürmer cartoon.
Especially in that first movie, I was like, God damn, Chris Columbus. Like, yeah, these look straight out of South Williamsburg. They're running the bank also. Any one of these elements is problematic, and she just put them all together. Big nose, bank.
Greedy. Long fingers.
Yeah.
Ugly.
Isolated from the rest of the wizarding world. Integrated but isolated.
Obsessed with gold.
Yeah, I think that's a great place to actually start the discussion of her world, is that J.K. Rowling takes a kitchen sink approach to building her fantasy world. If you think of a fantasy creature, it's probably in Harry Potter somewhere. We got wizards. We got werewolves. We got vampires. We got unicorns. We got centaurs. We got mermaids. We got griffins. We got dragons.
They just throw everything in. And unfortunately, I always thought, I love this world. She's so good at world building. But the main issue with J.K. Rowling is that this stuff is all really cool. But if you look at any one detail for more than 1 minute, it all falls apart. You have to enjoy a lot of this world at a very surface, shallow level. It's not like Dune or Game of Thrones.
Or The Lord of the Rings.
Or Lord of the Rings, where there is this very deep understanding of the internal logic of this world. And I'll give you a great example. There's only about 3,000 wizards in Britain.
That's what Hagrid says.
This is what Hagrid says in the first book. There's about 1,000 working for the ministry, and then 1,000 at Hogwarts. And then this leaves 1,000 other wizards, minus the children, for the rest of the non-ministry or non-Hogwarts world. And it opens up a host of issues with the internal logic of this system.
How do they support 2 newspapers?
Yeah.
Wizard print media is dying.
At one point, Ron is like, oh, he's the keeper for the Holyhead Harpies. And it's like, there's 3,000 people in this world. Like, nobody could have that level of celebrity.
There's also 7 people on one Quidditch team. How many teams are in the league?
Half the population is a professional Quidditch player. Let's say there was 10 Quidditch teams at any given time. 7% of the wizards are a fucking professional Quidditch
But
player.
that's 7 is your starting roster, right? Like, I assume you've got some bench players, maybe some people on IR. Like, I mean, you're telling me there's no 53-man roster?
Probably have some free agents flying around.
True. Yeah.
Flying around there. I see what you did.
Not to get too much of a fucking anarchist nerd about it, but Burning Man governs itself. That's way more than 3,000 people. Why do they need a Ministry of Magic at all? Why do they need police officers? Why do they need a torture jail? There's only 3,000 of you. Can't you just, like, do a little communal gathering, talk it out, restorative justice, whatever?
Yeah, I feel like whenever you hear about Azkaban, it's sort of implied that there are dozens to, like, 100 people at this jail, which basically gives the wizarding world a higher incarceration rate than the United States.
Look at the most famous resident that we know from Azkaban, wrongfully imprisoned.
Yeah. In a world with a truth serum, we know of multiple innocent people sent to Azkaban, the torture prison. This is the entire issue with this world building thing is, like I said, any one of these details, if you look at for more than 1 minute, and look at the other magical context, you could say, well, this doesn't make any sense. Consider the fact that Ron's family is bankrupt by buying all the children textbooks every year. In a world with replicating charms, in a world where half of the wizard population goes to a school, can we not supply the children with textbooks? Like
Hogwarts has a library.
Hogwarts has a library.
It's a third of the population. Where's the money going?
The real world has a textbook resale market, but not the magical world. The wand, another great example of something where this is an item so important to every wizard that you think there might be some level of universal wand availability, right? Considering how important it is. Oh, by the way, a wand in this world, according to what Harry pays, it costs about $7 in our money. And Ron has to use a wand that doesn't work.
A hand-me-down.
A hand-me-down wand that doesn't work, right?
Not like Harry could spot his friend at 20 and be like, go pick something nice.
Yeah,
we'll get
dude.
matching wands with fucking sick fucking, you'll get red lasers, I'll get blue ones, it'll be sick. Like, no, like, he's not the cool friend with the car. He has the money to be, but he's not.
The cool friend with the car is a great way to
Like,
put
he
that.
could be, but he's not, because he's an ass.
And I'll say, if I could be a stand-in for Potterheads out there, I'd point out that Ron is very proud and won't accept any charity.
Mm-hmm.
This is Michael Moore, apparently.
Pretty good Michael Moore.
But you're right. That's a great example of how someone who did exist and had money would probably treat their friend as you find ways to incorporate it in which it's not explicitly charity. I have a car, so we're going to take rides in it. And Harry does this a little bit where he's like, hey, I'll buy all the candy and we can share it. But it doesn't really seem like one of his main focuses ever. Hey, how do I make sure that Ron isn't incredibly destitute?
In fact, the opposite. He takes a lot of charity from the Weasleys.
The one gift he buys Ron is omnioculars, which are only useful for watching the Quidditch World Cup.
For watching him play Quidditch, presumably, when they get back to Hogwarts.
I mean, he is a dick.
Yeah, like, this is what I'm talking about, man. Ron has a right to be pissed at this guy.
While we're talking about Quidditch, can we just talk about how fucking stupid this this game is? Imagine there's a special basketball game where there's the game of basketball, but then also there's a mini putt green on the side. And if you can sink the golf ball in the hole, you get 250 points.
She wanted a game to show off your Messiah hero, special boy, chosen one in world. So you design a game where one player is able to catch the snitch, earn 150 points, and immediately end the game. In a unit where the only other scoring mechanism is in units of 10. Why bother with the quaffle at all?
Clearly someone who probably does not follow sports in any capacity.
True.
Also, how the fuck are you going to have a seeker with glasses? Your job is to see a miniature fucking golf ball sized golden thing flying around in this chaotic environment of a Quidditch pitch. You got a motherfucker with glasses?
They don't even give him the athletic goggles.
We did our prequels episodes last year, so maybe this is our once a year episode where we just do get into the minutia, which obviously is stupid to talk about. But yeah, why aren't the beaters just targeting the seeker the whole time? No one has figured out this game.
Yeah, like, guys, we could really moneyball this shit. The tip of the broom is going off. The fucking wrist that he's using to reach for the seeker, fucking break it. What are they going to do? There's no bench players, as far as we know.
No, there are not.
Like, all right, let's go. Let's go win a championship.
Also, Hagrid says that people have died playing Quidditch, which makes sense. You're zooming around up there, you fall off the broom, beater accidentally hits you in the head, bludger knocks you off your broom, you fall to your death. Why are we having children play this game?
Oh, football is dangerous too.
Pop Warner football, yeah.
Oh, okay, all right.
So let's move on to our themes, big ideas. We're going to talk about whimsy, we're going to talk about neoliberalism, and we're going to talk about class in Harry Potter and racism. So first, we'll talk a little about whimsy. This is actually the complementary part. There's one theme where we're actually going to be saying nice things about Rowling in the Harry Potter world, because these books, I think, work because there is this sense of whimsy wherein everything is magical, but not in an optimal way. Everything is kind of annoying in this world, and it gives it this very fun feeling, right? Where the candy is a chocolate frog, but it jumps away from you. Where the jelly beans, they come in every flavor, including vomit or troll bogey. There are vanishing books that the bookstore loses and can't find. Or
the paintings move, and you need to tell the sentient painting the password to get into your dormitory. But sometimes the painting lady leaves to visit other painting ladies, and you're locked out of your dorm.
Those are probably the thing from this world that we're closest to inventing through technology. I can't wait to get my giant Elon Musk painting on the wall and have him deliver epic lines to me. Like,
It's just a gif of him jumping up and down, making the X with his body. That's the Elon overpromise version of the moving painting. It's just a giant digital gif or GIF, whatever the fuck.
He keeps threatening to fight you and then backing out of it. Yeah, so there's a book of monsters that behaves like a monster. And so it's this like weird sense where everything is magical, but also frustrating and doesn't quite work in an optimized way that we would see in our own world. And that's why it feels like this nice form of escapism, because it isn't like our own world. One of my favorite parts of Harry Potter is that it's not a globalized marketplace that has solved most of our economic demands. So, for example, in the second movie, there's all these students getting stunned, and all they have to do to come back to life is drink juice from a mandrake, which the school has to grow to get the students back. There is no globalized world where they could just order these from Russia or somewhere where they have mandrakes available. This is why the focus on Hogwarts too, like I said, keeps some of these mistakes in the world building from becoming too apparent, because Hogwarts is this one specific microcosm where the rules are more narrow and strict. So that was our complimentary part. Let's move on to the mean parts. The first being neoliberalism.
Yes, I know a lot of people roll their eyes when they hear this word because it is thrown around a lot by lefties, but let's be clear. J.K. Rowling is a neoliberal. She is good personal friends with Gordon Brown, who was the Chancellor of the Exchequer under Tony Blair as they dismantled what was left of the welfare state in the 90s and 2000s. She donated £1 million to Gordon Brown's Labour Party in 2008, when that party was on its way out. They were about to get trounced in 2010, and they did. But wouldn't you know it, she was highly, vocally critical of the leadership of one Jeremy Corbyn.
Wow, never would have guessed.
And unsurprisingly, these politics seep into the text.
Yes, I don't think she intended for them, but I just think because her mind is so infatuated with the concept of neoliberalism and equality of opportunity rather than outcome, it becomes so apparent when you're reading these books. When Hagrid's saying something like, the only thing that's important is whether you got any talent on why you would be included in the wizarding world. It's not like the only thing that's important is that you're a human being with a shared humanity.
No.
It is like, what is your ability? How can you pull yourself up by your bootstraps?
I've been reading this book on chavs recently, maybe an episode coming down the pipeline on that. One of the things that this chav book pointed out is that before Thatcherism, the Labour Party in Britain talked about improving and strengthening the working class. So that meant strengthening trade unions, guaranteeing council housing, public housing, like a whole host of other pillars of being a working class British person that meant you could live a life of some dignity. After Thatcher, Labour started talking about expanding the middle class. Like, some folks are going to leave the working class and join the middle class, and we're going to shrink that working class. We're all going to become middle class as much as we can. And this is after Thatcher had destroyed a lot of those pillars of working class British life, like trade unions and union halls and council housing. So this is reflected, this neoliberal British mindset, in the Harry Potter universe, because the working classes have been replaced by either magic or slaves.
Yeah, there is no working class in the Harry Potter universe.
Yeah, refresh my memory. Like, what the fuck do the Weasleys do that they're so poor? The dad works in government, which is a third of the population, so presumably, unless the boss hates him, right? He's getting some livable wage.
So there are two options for that.
Is the blame just that they have too many kids?
Yes.
Oh, so this is a neoliberal thing.
Yes.
She believes in the Malthusian trap, J.K. Rowling.
J.K. Rowling is bringing a certain 19th century Whig attitude.
These damn breeders.
Yeah, that they would have had towards the Irish.
Yeah, I'll tell you what the problem with the Irish is. They have too many children.
That's why they have red hair. Holy shit.
That's the only explanation for how they can remain poor in this universe.
They're O Weasley in the original draft.
And this is pretty similar to our modern neolibs. They still talking about expanding the middle class, and they don't talk about the working class. Our version of magic and slaves, magic is technology. We're going to automate. We're going to have technology replace a lot of these jobs. And our version of slaves is just offshoring and globalization. It is a one-to-one comparison. As I was re-listening to these audiobooks, I started making a comprehensive list of the jobs that a wizard can have in the Harry Potter universe. Here's what it appears to be. You can be a government bureaucrat, you can be a research professor, you can be a professional athlete, you can be a small business owner at Diagon Alley, or you can be a cop. Those are the jobs.
But there's no laborers.
No.
Unless you're a house elf. Unless you're a slave.
Do you think they have house elves doing fucking delivery, like a butterbeer to go?
They like doing it, John. They like delivering butterbeer.
Yeah, it's fucking snowing and they're just out there on fucking e-bike.
Dobby is a good gig worker, sir.
If there's a house elf who likes the system and defends it, the other house elves call him an Uncle Tom Bombadil.
Yeah, so one of the examples of how her own sensibilities seep into this, I think, is reading over Goblet of Fire. This is where Hermione really gets concerned about the plight of the house elf. She first goes on a hunger strike in this book, which she quickly abandons because, hey, you know, she's a youth full of ideals. She doesn't really have any commitment to any of these things. She's just wanting to protest. She's obsessed with being a protester, right? I think that's how she sort of views actual revolutionary thought, being a flash in the pan, someone who's just interested in self-aggrandizing themselves.
Yes, everyone is so patronizing to Hermione when she starts going on this very reasonable crusade.
Not even revolutionary. It's just like a bare minimum moral stance.
Well, what you're meant to believe is, oh, look at this liberal woman from the Muggle world who doesn't understand that we have our own customs and this isn't a transferable idea. She also, in this book, she reads Hogwarts a History, and she points out that this history book is very biased. It doesn't include perspectives from the house elves or people who aren't wizards, people who aren't in the positions of power. And once again, she is met with derision from Harry Potter and Ron, her friends, right? Someone who might want to take her side and be like, hey, you know what? This is a cause that's important to you. Maybe I should learn to see the world through your eyes, especially considering for Ron, this is going to be his life partner. And I think why this is a deeply neoliberal text is that Hermione will go on to become the Minister for Magic. She will pull herself up by her bootstraps, become the Minister for Magic. And what does she do at this point in her career? Does she free the house elves? No. She's old enough to realize that the world is about compromise. You know, the world is about tiny reforms. She reforms the house elf system so that you can't be quite as abusive to them.
Nice.
So it's the compromise that leaves no one happy, but everyone happy. You know?
That's canon?
Yeah.
God, that's fucking dark.
It's like Churchill says, if you don't support house elf liberation at 20, you have no heart. But if you do support house elf liberation at 40, then you have no brain.
What are you trying to do? Tank their economy?
Right, because we learn in this book that most of the house elves working for Hogwarts, they cook all the food, they wash the sheets, they put heating pans in the beds to heat the students while they're warm.
So do they have some of the smaller house elves curl around their feet to keep them warm at night? Like, Jesus fucking Christ. They couldn't even get to the point where they abolished the slave labor in the series? I have to say, whatever happened to the seventh one, I don't really recall from the films. That's fucking atrocious.
Yeah, and what's crazy about it is I could understand house elves in this world if they're specifically owned by families like the Malfoys, right? People who inherited these slaves from an older time, right? They're these holdovers from a less progressive era, and specifically by the most evil and wealthy families. That's a context in which I think these house elves might make more sense in this canon. And then it would make more sense when Hermione protests them, because she's like, hey, listen, there are these old families benefiting from this form of labor, which is highly unethical, which is how our society works, right?
But how did the old families get the house elves? Because Dobby's not an old elf, right? Is the implication that they own Dobby's parents, and then when Dobby was born, they were like, well, now we own Dobby too? Is that canon?
Let me see how old is Dobby. Oh, 28 years old.
Jesus.
It looks great for 28, you know?
Because actually, when Harry goes to Sirius Black's house, all of the heads of all the prior elves are mounted on the wall.
Do I have to cancel Sirius Black?
It's considered to be a point of pride for an elf to have his head eventually mounted on the family's wall.
Oh my god.
I am beside myself. This is fucking...
Presumably anyone with a house elf is also doing this. And Harry owns a house elf at the end of the series. He owns Creature.
Oh, hey, here's another job in the universe, is house elf taxidermist.
That's a small business person.
That's a small business owner. That's a Diagon Alley shop.
Yeah, it might be more of a Nocturne Alley job. It's just funny that that's the one moral issue in Harry Potter that seems to be left unanswered in both sides. Right? Racism, wrong. Fascism, wrong. Slavery, well, you know, they like being slaves.
Well, if they've been imprisoned, maybe it's fine.
Yeah. Okay, so my point there was just that I could buy into a world a little bit more where it's like, okay, there's this supremacist, aristocratic class that owns these slaves, and like, hey, we just haven't been able to get rid of them. But no. The school, the thing that generally is the most progressive parts of our society in our world, in some ways. No, they have the most slaves. And hey, they can't run Hogwarts without them, and the elves love it. So, but we're starting to see cracks in Rowling's facade. We're starting to see the Rowling that we know and love today, right? In 2004, where it's like, why is she being so weird about this slavery thing? And using it to make fun of Hermione for being sympathetic. Because we're going to see her become a TERF later in life. And I think that these ideas are very much related, right? She cannot help herself. She never apologizes and always doubles down.
Yep.
Come on, Lois. It's the one thing I'm good at. I am to birthdays what J.K. Rowling is to now problematic wizard stories.
Perhaps Slytherin, or maybe Hufflepuff, or trans women aren't really women.
Wait, what?
I mean, the first two things. Okay, who's the next girl or boy? There's only those two.
One of my favorite J.K. Rowling awful tweets was when she said, I never said Hermione wasn't black. She thinks that she left the door cracked open because she kept talking about Hermione's frizzy hair.
Right.
So, yes, imagine all those scenes where we have a young girl agitating for the oppressed and everyone scoffs at her and is demeaning and disparaging to her. But now she's the only black kid at Hogwarts. And how much worse is that?
Yeah. Hermione is black in the Cursed Child play as well. So it's become full canon. And yeah, now we're thinking about a situation where even her friends are like, what are you doing about this anti-slavery thing? So they never really seek to impose any kind of revolutionary change on their society. And this is something, unfortunately, because this is one of the most millennial texts, there are so many YouTube videos analyzing Harry Potter. It's always hard to find something novel to say. And this is something people have spoken about a lot, is that Rowling is not interested in structural change at all, right? Hermione is going to become Minister for Magic and at most make reforms.
Yeah, I mean, this is an anti-big government text in so many ways, right? The neolibs love to shrink down or right-size government and let the free market handle more things. And one of the major antagonists throughout those later books is a corrupt, overbearing, bureaucratic Ministry of Magic.
Yes, the government is the problem. In the fifth book, especially in Order of the Phoenix, right? This is the person who's persecuting Harry primarily. And it also includes the Daily Prophet. The largest newspaper is not willing to share Harry's story. Like, the publishing industry is on board with the state in their goals of silencing Harry.
Propaganda arm.
Yes, exactly.
Big magic.
They should be speaking truth to power. They should be the fifth estate of this world. And yet they're too worried about losing their access at the ministry. Harry is forced into publishing his story by sort of the weekly world news of the wizarding world, the Quibbler. Okay, let's talk a little bit about prison abolition. I guess we already did. But yeah, this is a world where prison is a place where you are tortured psychologically into always feeling a sense of anxiety, despair.
They want to release you back into society, right?
Yeah, true. I don't know to what extent rehabilitation is possible. It seems to be mostly punitive. A lot of people are sent here for, like, I think there's some guy who commits some kind of copyright violation and is sent to Azkaban.
Christ.
Hagrid is sent there while he awaits a trial. This place is fucking Rikers Island.
Yeah,
Like,
Jesus.
Hermione should also be protesting Azkaban.
Sorry, Harry Potter's not woke?
Well, no one is interested in this world of ever reconsidering their relationship to the torture prison. Even Harry himself isn't ever like, why are we running this place? My godfather was sent there while innocent, as was one of my main guardians, Hagrid.
And he becomes a cop.
And he becomes a cop. He sees
like
people
fun.
get sent to Azkaban innocently, and he's like, I'm going to become the guy who sends people to Azkaban.
The world of magic. Feel the magic, the imagination come through.
Also, the Dementors worked for Voldemort in his first run, right?
Yeah.
And then we hired him as the prison guards.
Yeah.
To guard the Voldemort supporters. I see a flaw in this logic.
Are you saying that you support a genocide of the Dementors? So, okay, let's talk a little bit about class in Harry Potter, our next theme here, because I think that there's...
Well, this is still under the subcategory of neoliberalism.
Well, class with respect to the Dursleys. I think the Dursleys are a very fun satire of Little Britain Brexit voters. They are small business owners with a narrow worldview, would have 100% voted for Brexit. We learned in Prisoner of Azkaban Uncle Vernon's reactionary views on criminal justice, which is, when will they learn that hangings are the only solution? It's funny, we're meant to satire Uncle Vernon's worldview, and yet the actual things that everybody else stands for in this world don't seem to be that different.
Much better to just torture people.
Right? Yes. Yeah, we're supposed to make fun of Vernon for thinking they should hang people, but all of our main characters seem to advocate for the use of Azkaban.
Yeah,
prison.
hanging? How barbaric. Suck his soul out of his mouth.
Yeah, welcome to magical Abu Ghraib. Like, fuck you.
The Dursleys are meant to be parodied and satired and laughed at because they don't believe in the whimsy. They're joyless.
Yes.
And there's a line in the first chapter of the first book, which is sort of kind of from Vernon Dursley's perspective, where the narrator says he imagined he saw someone in a purple cloak or something, and he caught himself. Vernon didn't believe in imagining. It's so over the top. It's like the antagonist in a Robin Williams movie who is opposed to fun, you know?
Yeah. And so, yeah, they're petit bourgeois. He owns a drill company. He uses his class status to lord it above anyone he can. Him and Petunia often engage in performative consumption. There is a satire here, I think, of a certain type of person in Britain, right? Whereas Hermione, I think, represents the PMC class, as I said. Her parents are dentists. That's probably the most dispassionate PMC job I could think of, someone who has traded passion for class status. And she goes on to become one of the most powerful people in the wizarding world through her work ethic. And so there's all sorts of social climber characters like this in the Harry Potter universe. I love the character of Percy Weasley. He's someone who is, like Hermione, a very big keener, always doing his homework, prefect, head boy, immediately goes to work for the ministry, and she sort of satirizes Percy because he's disloyal to his family. Percy gets a little bit of power and then turns on his family and sides with the state over his family and ultimately suffers for it. People at the ministry, very funnily, they don't remember his name.
There are 3,000 people in the world.
Yeah, true. And the main guru that he works for at the ministry, Barty Crouch, turns out to be an imposter, so he's left hanging. But yeah, I really like the character of Percy. He's a social climber, but the bad kind, not like Hermione, the good kind of social climber.
So that's all of the various aspects of Rowling's neoliberalism and how they bleed into the world. Let's talk racism. Like we said, the book is about racism in so many ways. It's about this wizard supremacist movement that needs to be stopped and put out, that's been going on for centuries, all the way back to Salazar's Slytherin. It's the big moral issue of the story that everything hinges upon. Are you a pure blood wizard, or did you immigrate into the wizarding world?
Yeah, this allusion is made through the entire books, right? That you have the model minority immigrant class who has to study harder and work harder to assimilate into it, but still faces racism.
And yeah, by the final books, this is explicitly this very ham-fisted World War II metaphor. Voldemort is Hitler, mudbloods are the victims of Nazism, and Dumbledore's army is the British army. Might as well call it the Royal Dumbledore's army. Oh, the Royal Army of Dumbledore, the Rad. Would have been good.
Yeah, there's sort of a Holocaust-style allegory in the 7th book.
It's almost remarkable that there is no sort of parallel to monarchy. I would have not been shocked if there was some sort of wizarding royal family. But she seems to have held back on that one.
Interesting. Yeah, true. She never really gets into it about the royal family. I don't think they're ever even mentioned in any of the books.
Maybe she's not a monarchist. Maybe she's a Republican.
It's entirely possible.
And of course, if we're going to talk about racism, we need to also mention the actual racism of J.K. Rowling and her tropes. So we've already mentioned the goblin bankers. We, of course, have the infamous love interest Cho Chang.
Yeah, nice one. Way to use the second idea.
Yeah, I also love that the only Irish character is named Seamus Finnegan, and I think in multiple points in the movies we see him accidentally blow stuff up.
Yeah, he can't help but make a car bomb whenever he's trying to make anything.
IRA intensifies. There's one thing I want to say. This is our last kind of theme, is that, as we've said, this is a special boy chosen one narrative, hero's journey. You've seen it a million times before. And Harry has to die for our sins and save the world. Again, he dies a couple times and comes back. Now, the one thing that I want to flag about this is that in the later books, it's revealed that there was a prophecy, a big prophecy about a kid born in a particular year to particular parents who will be the one to end the Dark Lord. And the thing is that it could only be two boys. It could be Harry Potter or the thoroughly underwhelming dud Millhouse-style character, Neville Longbottom. And if J.K. were a better writer, it would end up being Neville. It would undercut our expectations. It would prove that even small people, like the hobbits and Tolkien, maybe.
Like non-Harry Potter people.
Yeah, like non-Harry Potter people are capable of doing great things. But unfortunately, she's not. So Harry lives up to his messianic expectations and wins.
He actually does die and return to life in the 7th book.
Which he had already done as a baby, as you mentioned. She even put the little fucking seed in book 1 with Neville. Unintentionally, probably. Or at least something she looked back on and was like, oh, this is why I can make him one of the options.
Yeah, Neville has an arc where he learns to be brave and stand up to his friends. And it's his points that put Gryffindor over the finish line.
Right. Okay, should we move on to our miscellaneous dunking section here?
Yeah. So you might have thought when we described the world and we yelled about time turners and Quidditch and the 3,000 person world, you might have thought that was our dunking session, but the dunking session is actually now. And I want to start with a quick rant about the Sorting Hat, okay? The Sorting Hat. We're in book 1. Harry's a fish out of water. Like I already said, kids feel this way all the time, confused, disoriented. They've had imperfect information. Harry says, please not Slytherin, please not Slytherin, please not Slytherin, because the only interaction he's had was in Diagon Alley with Draco Malfoy, and it was a negative one. And the Sorting Hat says to him, Harry, you would make a good Slytherin. But in the end, puts him in Gryffindor, right? At a later point in the books, Harry's talking to Dumbledore, and Dumbledore tells him, you know, there have been many great Slytherins. Check your prejudices, check your biases. And I read that in book 1, I'm like, damn, what a great lesson for kids, right? That's so nuanced for children's literature. How awesome is that? Kids, you're going to be confused sometimes, but don't let your prejudices color your vision or whatever. Flash forward to book 7, every Slytherin is a Nazi.
Yeah.
Each and every single one.
The password to get into the Slytherin common room in the 2nd year, a year in which a monster is killing Muggle-born students, is pure blood.
Yeah, we go from some nuance to just zero black and white.
That is something that they had said right from the beginning, right? That not every Slytherin is evil, but all evil ones have been Slytherin.
It's a squares and rectangles sort of thing. I love, or sorry, not love, but we're in our dunking session, the comic incompetence of the adult wizards in this world. We have multiple characters, from Hagrid to Professor McGonagall, say, no one could steal the Philosopher's Stone from Hogwarts. It's the most secure place on Earth. And our 3 11-year-olds are able to get there by, number 1, figuring out that plants are susceptible to fire. Number 2, winning a chess game. Number 3, solving an LSAT logic problem. This is the best you had?
Yeah, there's only 3,000 of them. They don't know exactly how to create rigorous testing to only get the top percentile here.
Well, it's Dumbledore at it again. Surely nobody can play chess and solve an LSAT question.
Motherfucker was a big fish in a small pond.
We got that other view into the rest of the wizarding world. Beauxbaton, the French school, Durmstrang, the Eastern European one.
Durmstrang is in a country that is never stated. I like to imagine it's from the imaginary country that racist Brexiteers invented. It's a country that stretches from Russia to the Balkans. And while never explicitly stated, I mean, these guys are wearing Adidas tracksuits underneath their robes. They're attaching dash cams to the front of their broomsticks. They're just squatting, smoking wizard cigarettes.
I have a digression. One of the things I always found uniquely frustrating with the series was that as it was supposed to get older, Rowling, we talked a little bit about it, the idea that she just tried to make it more serious by making it like, well, more people are going to die. And it was like, well, you're trying to actually make the school story. And if you wanted to keep it focused on the school stuff, where were the magical STDs? Where were any of the other more like school problems coming up that would have sort of escalated? Like, where were the magical drugs? They messed around a little bit with like, oh, pranks, but you're telling me there was no good magical drugs?
Yeah, in terms of the British high school experience, there's not a lot of overlap with the show Skins with the Hogwarts world, you know?
Or even the in-betweeners.
Yeah. And these are a bunch of teenagers and they're not interested in ever getting drunk or having sex. She keeps wanting to move into more adult themes, but those adult themes, yeah, do not extend to things like sex, drugs.
Just murder.
Yeah, just death. Right. One of the details that I'm most frustrated with is that we learned that there are Native American wizards and that they don't use wands, but that also in the Crimes of Grindelwald series, we learned that there is a wizarding society in America that is not Native American, but presumably inherited from Britain, which implies that there was wizard colonialism happening at some point between now and the discovery of the New World, which makes no sense because the conditions and incentives for regular colonialism were the slave trade and the triangle triangle trade with the Atlantic. And it's like, well, were these also the incentives for the wizards?
Where do you think they got the house elves? Like, do you think they're native to the British Isles?
I love that John and I said the same joke at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, you were setting us up when we were just spiking it down.
Does it also imply that the First Nations wizards was devastated by dragonpox? Like, what happened to them? Why are we only meeting the more Western style wizards? The American wizards that we do meet are all white people, is my point. They have displaced the native wizard population of the Americas. Was Hogwarts in America like a residential school? What happened?
No.
My other issues with this book, I mean, they are very fat phobic. I feel like anytime Rowling wants to underscore that someone is a bad person, she's like, and then Crabbe and Goyle fattingly fatted across the fat fingers. Like,
they waddled across the room fattingly.
Yeah, or with the Dursleys or Dudley, she does that all the time as well. He also features a scene in which an adult man turns a fat child into a pig. A presumably 50-year-old man bullies a 10-year-old child.
I also want to say briefly, the Harry Potter houses are so fucking dumb. And this is not a joke I wrote myself, but I'm going to repeat it. You know how all children can be classified into brave, smart, evil, or miscellaneous? They're so dumb. And I guess it's not a big deal in and of itself, but when you have people treating Harry Potter houses like it's a fucking personality test, the Zodiac is better than this.
The killer?
The killer? No. Yeah, if any adult tells you I'm such a Ravenclaw, just stop talking to them immediately.
So what house are you? You don't have a house? Jordana, what's your house?
I'm Slytherin because I'm racist, I think. No, I mean, if you love Harry Potter, you're almost certainly a Ravenclaw, because that's the nerd house.
Yeah.
Or the Keener house. All right, let's move on and we'll talk a little bit about echoes in the culture. We got to wrap this up.
Yeah. So the first is, of course, the monkey's paw effect. People wanted millennials to learn to read. And they learned to love to read, but at what cost? At the expense of absolutely ruining their tastes.
I love that that's the defense people give of Harry Potter all the time, is like, this is the book that taught millennials how to read. And it's like, yeah, it was the last book they ever read.
Yeah, I don't think you can overstate how the longest lasting echo in the culture is how annoying an entire generation of adults become. People saying, what's my Harry Potter house? What's your Harry Potter house? Oh my gosh, Trump is Cheeto Voldemort, etc., etc. Yeah. You need a new way to view the world, okay? They're fine children's books, but they are not an interpretive lens through which you can derive meaning from the world. The world of Harry Potter doesn't make any fucking sense.
Read another book, I think is our point.
Well, they did. It was Game of Thrones. Yeah. We need a third book series.
Respect to the Harry Potter fans for at least not making us have to watch a new Fantastic Beasts movie every year. They did not quite well enough so that they seem to have put the kibosh on new movies coming out. These movies are so wildly bad. I think I've tried to watch the first Fantastic Beasts movie like 3 times and have given up 20 or 30 minutes into it every time. Turns out there's not a lot of meat on the bones of a tie-in book.
The tie-in fictional in-universe textbook didn't give them a lot to work with.
But they are coming out with a new series.
Yes, that's supposed to just be the classic story, 1 season for every book, which would not be a bad way to do it, given how often there are opportunities to meander in these stories with the classes. And I just hope that they have standalone episodes, because that's one of my least favorite parts of modern TV shows.
We hit this note all the time on this pod, but in the 2000s, we have the beginning of our never-ending quest for IP. What can we turn into a franchise that will bring us regular, consistent, insanely high margin returns? And Harry Potter was an insanely successful juggernaut of a franchise, right? We're looking at 7 books, 8 movies, spin-off books, spin-off movies based off those spin-off books, miscellaneous tie-in foods and beverages, and a fucking theme park. No, sorry, scratch that. 4 theme parks.
Jesus, I only knew the one.
Yeah, 2 in Asia, 2 in America. And, of course, the fucking play that Giordano subjected himself to.
Yep, has been playing for many years now. We've crystallized so much of the 2000s pop culture, and someone, I think on, I can't remember the name of the podcast, but they called it Foreverism. Basically, when something is popular now, the idea is that it should generate money forever, and not just one time.
But a specific Harry Potter franchise echo in the culture is that it normalized really stretching out source material like Taffy. It's the first adaptation I remember the 7th book being split into 2 movies, which would then happen with the 3 Hobbit movies. It would then happen with the Twilight movie. And we're seeing it still with Wicked Part 1, 2-hour, 40-minute musical being split into 2 movies.
Oh my God. The Hobbit was the worst offender, but yeah, even Wicked. The delve into the Wizard of Oz lore has to be split into 2 movies.
I did also see something recently that I have to agree with, and especially true, I think, for the first 4, maybe they just stand out more. I feel like maybe it's because once the Half-Blood Prince, it got really dark, literally, on the screen. But those movies, you could see the money on screen. Those movies were a big tentpole thing, kind of like Lord of the Rings, in the sense that if there's something to kind of like latch onto there, it's that you have some of the greats of British screen and stage there.
Yeah.
They actually generally look quite good. And I just find that if there is like a redeeming quality, it's that I think there's just a very high quality of craftsmanship going on in those movies. And at least there's those. At least the films sort of bring something there that I think I didn't always get reading the books. And I don't think the movies are a particularly even series, but I think that at the very least you could see that they were trying to make a real series with movies that would ideally, I think they wanted to stand the test of time. And I think that the first few probably do a little bit better, closer to that Lord of the Rings sort of style, but maybe that's just me.
I love, too, that these new movies, it's like, okay, we know how you loved all these beloved British actors, but what if we replaced those with Johnny Depp and Ezra Miller?
Is that what? Those are actually who was cast for it?
Yeah. I think both of whom they had to replace because of their generally just being shitheads.
If you are a millennial who fell in love with reading because of Harry Potter, that's okay. Reading is a positive thing. It's a net benefit, but you gotta read another book, as we've said. And I'll just say, we frequently play this game on this pod. Are you happy this media exists? Frequently when we're talking about something not great or something that hasn't aged well. I believe Giordano asked this of me of the film Loose Change. And I said, yeah, sure. But despite the fact that the knock-on effects of Harry Potter were so deleterious for society, I am happy that they exist. I'm happy these books exist, or I'm at least happy that those OG books exist. I don't think I'm ever going to watch the movies again, but yeah, it's good. They're fine. They're fine children's literature for children that you should read in childhood.
All right, well, if you've joined us today, thank you. And we get to finally get to Harry Potter. Sound off in the comments about something you hated. Join us in this parasocial relationship. So, John, anything you'd like to plug? I feel like you're never ready for this question.
No, I mean, I don't have anything to plug. What do I have fucking going on? You guys call me to come on a podcast? I'm like, yeah, I'll do it. I don't have...
Age of Sigmar?
I mean, no, Jesus Christ. If you're going to play Warhammer, play the proper rank and flank. Play some square bases. Don't play Age of Sigmar. 40k if you must, but I mean, no, it's all about that old world, baby.
John, thank you so much for coming on the pod.
Thank you, John. Yes, we appreciate your time. And leave a review. We love to see it. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and leave a review, especially if you're using Apple Podcasts. So, goodbye.
Ciao.
Ciao.